Welcome. In this lecture, we're going to be learning all about the animation blueprint, the heart and soul of the animation system. By the end of it, you're going to be fluent with it, understand things like animation poses and what an actual animation is, and fundamentally what this anim graph, this crazy thing I've got in the middle here, is doing. And you'll use all of this knowledge, put it to the test to get this preview animation of a guy dying or whatever kind of animation you actually want. We will be able to do whatever you like with this animation blueprint, within reason. Between this and the next lectures, you're going to have all the powers you need to do animation. So let's take a look at the game as it stands. If we go ahead and hit play, we'll notice our character is doing his animation job. He's got a gun in his hand, but he isn't firing. And to fire, we need to do some animation. Now, previously when we did animation, we just kind of overwrote everything that was happening in the animation blueprint, an object which we didn't quite fully understand. But that's not how things are done in animation. It can be complex interactions, and you want to know whether the shooting animation should be different in crouching, whether it should be able to happen at all when you're jumping, and things like that. Complex interactions like that need to be thought about in animation. So we are going to look at that too. So to do that, we have to find our animation blueprint. I'm going to come out of play mode now. And we are going to go to our animations folder. That's NPC animations in our lovely new hierarchy. And we've got a lot of stuff in here. Lots of animation clips, and the animation blueprint is kind of lost. Now, of course, we can use filters to grab it. So if I go to filters, down to animation, and then select the animation blueprint, then there you go. It just shows that there is one animation blueprint in this file hierarchy. However, that's quite tiresome. We're going to have to be going to access the animation blueprint very often. And while it's not always a good idea to have filters mimic the folder structure or have the folder structure mimic the filters, sometimes just for brevity, it's easier to do that. So I'm going to right click on the animation folder to create a new folder to put all our animation clips in and basically allow us to get to our animation blueprint more easily. So I'll right click, new folder, I'm going to call it animation clips and no spaces. So I'm going to go up to my animations, grab everything. So I find it easier to put everything in than move the animation blueprint out again. I'm going to move that into our animation clips, move here. And when that's done, unloading, cleaning up assets, etc. Going to animation clips, going to filter by the animation blueprint again, and just drag that back out to the animations level. Okay, so now without filters, we're able to very easily get hold of our patrolling guard too. So I'm going to go ahead and open that animation blueprint. And boom, we're hit with a wall of new editor window because here we've got the animation blueprint and it is a complex blueprint editor. Now we're going to take it in chunks. In this first chunk, we're just going to deal with the stuff that is more familiar perhaps, and something called the anim graph, and what on earth is an anim graph. We'll find out about that. In the next lecture, we'll deal with the more complex topic of state machines, and how the interactions between different animations work. But first, let's cover the basics. You see here again, we've got that shortcut bar that we're used to from perhaps when we've edited skeletons or meshes or looked at animations. These just let us to get between different related assets. They're not strictly related. These arrows are kind of disingenuous, and in newer versions of the editor they will disappear because basically it's not like a one-to-one mapping between all of these. They're just shortcuts between the currently open animation, currently open mesh and skeleton and graph. So don't read too much into this shortcut bar. Now, the main purpose of this editor is being able to preview things. And here on the left-hand side in the middle, we've got a preview of our character's animation in the Unreal parking lot by the looks of things. Yes, I think that is actually the Unreal parking lot. Now, you can see he's gently animating here. And what we can do is change how he's animating using the details in the details down here in the bottom left corner. And this is the whole point of the animation blueprint, is that using a few simple properties like your speed, direction, whether you're jumping, whether you're crouching, it infers how the character should be animating. And there's some complex logic going on in the animation blueprint, but you don't need to know about it just yet, because what you can do is play with your speed to make him run, And you can play with the direction he's moving in to change the direction his legs are going. Obviously, the ground isn't moving underneath because it's just previewing his animation, not actually how the character would move in the world. And then I can hit enable jump, and he jumps. Notice that if I hit jumping, it doesn't quite work. That seems to be some kind of private intermediary variable. We don't need to worry about it. And crouching crouches down, and we carry on moving as well. So I'd like you just to pause and do a mini challenge of trying to make your character move around in the patrolling guard as well. Okay, welcome back. So next up, so we've seen what's going on the left-hand side. We've seen the short cuts at the top. Now what's going on in the middle? This is your standard kind of event graph that you'll see in almost any animation blueprint. Now, or any blueprint, full stop. And obviously it's in tabs again, like we've seen in other blueprints. And to get to the different graphs, you will go to the My Blueprint tab, which in our case, in this layout, is in the middle, as you can see. And you can go to the event graph, and you can see that there's other graphs as well, but we've got our event graph open here. And as usual for a My Blueprint tab, we've got the variables. You saw the variables that we were editing over on the left. They're repeated here because that's actually where they're defined. And you've got functions such as can jump, which if we open it up, you see opens up another tab in our central event graph area. I don't quite know what to call it, the central tab area. Okay, so that's all familiar to us. That should be familiar. We've also got a detail pane over to the right, which gives us the details of the currently selected My Blueprint item. So if you've got a graph or a function selected, it tells you details about it on the right. Now, a few differences. We have something called an anim graph here. What is an anim graph? Well, it is simply a way of changing what is currently animating. As you see on the right here, we've got something called the final animation pose. Now, an animation pose is very basically just think of a bodybuilder pulling a pose. It is the setup, the rotation of all the bones in the skeleton that form one static image of that skeleton. So obviously our character has a skeleton, the mesh is applied to that skeleton, or that skeleton deforms a mesh, but we have to tell the skeleton what pose to be in, and that's what this final animation pose is. Now you can see there's kind of beads going through from what's known as the locomotion state machine. Now, you don't need to know much about the locomotion state machine other than to say it provides a series of different poses. Effectively, that is what an animation is, a series of poses, one after the other. So jumping starts off with a crouch pose and a slightly less crouch pose until you're like flying in the air pose, and then back down to crouch pose. So that's how you see each one of these leg movements is a different pose. Basically, that's what's going on. So the locomotion state machine is feeding poses into the final animation pose. And this is where our asset browser comes in, because actually down here we've got a bunch. If you select the tab next to the My Blueprint, there's the asset browser. It shows us all the animation clips that we had from before. And you can use these to actually feed in to the final animation pose. And I'm going to challenge you to try and see, because it's quite intuitive, how you might do that for yourself. So I call the challenge Dance Monkey Dance because we are going to use the animation blueprint this time to make our character do something different in its preview. So I'd like to play an animation in the preview. You can choose whatever animation you want from the asset browser. Just go ahead and be creative. It's not going to impact. We're going to change it later anyway. But I just want you to get used to using the animation blueprint editor and trying out all of the different windows. So you need to get, obviously, to the anim graph in order to do this. And then I'd like you to use only the anim graph to achieve this. Make it play an animation using the anim graph and what you know of how blueprints work. And hint, try dragging from the animation pane, from that asset browser pane, into the anim graph and see what happens. So pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So we have seen that we're feeding in final animation poses from the state machine. What I want to show you is that if I take some other animation, I'm just going to look at what the names are here. I've got limited space on the screen so that you guys can see it more clearly. I'm going to go with perhaps a death animation. That should be fun. I'll get death 1, and I'll drag it into the anim graph. and you'll notice that there's this empty person icon on the right of that node. And if I drag that onto the result of the final animation pose node, you see it disconnects the state machine, and very much like a blueprint, it's now feeding the pose from the play death into the final animation pose. Now, you have to click the preview to get it to repeat, to compile rather, and as you can see, now we are playing from the play death animation in the anim graph and playing straight into the final pose. So there's no state machine going on here. So if I change the speed or try to jump, nothing's going to change because there's no logic going on in here anymore. It just plays a death animation into the final pose. So that's what an anim graph is in essence. It's a way of manipulating these poses to get a final result. And congratulations, we have got a preview of our character dying. Very satisfying. And I'll see you in the next lecture where we'll understand a bit more about this mysterious locomotion node.